Good morning, everyone. I hope this day finds you well and healthy. And of course, you just saw the opening slide. Welcome to Earthen Vessels. I'm Pastor Carol, and I hope you will be blessed today with this service. We are going to begin with our first hymn, Joyful, Joyful, which our own Bob Baker will play for us.
Joyful we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before thee, hail thee as the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness, drive the dark of doubt away. Giver of immortal gladness, fill us with the light of day. All thy works with joy surround thee, earth and heaven reflect thy rays. Stars and angels sing around thee, center of unbroken praise. Field and forest, vale and mountain, blossoming meadow, flashing sea, chanting bird and flowing fountain, call us to rejoice in thee. Thou art giving and forgiving, ever blessing, ever blessed, wellspring of the joy of living, ocean depth of happy rest. Thou the Father, Christ our brother, all who live in love are thine. Teach us how to love each other, lift us to the joy divine. Mortals join the mighty chorus which the morning stars began. Father love is reigning o'er us, brother love binds man to man. Ever singing march we onward, victors in the midst of strife. Joyful music lifts us onward in the triumph song of life. Joyful music lift us onward in the triumph song of life.
And isn't that true? Joyful music lifts us sunward. Even on a cloudy day, joyful music brings joy to our hearts. So I hope that did for you. So today our scripture reading comes from Genesis 4:11 to 12. As we discussed last week, we're talking about Cain and Abel, and we're picking up on that this week, but in a different direction that I thought it's important to bring out. So here God is talking to Cain, and he says, "And now are you cursed from the earth, which has opened her mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand? When you till the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto you her strength. A fugitive and vagabond shall you be in the earth." Not wonderful words to hear, I would think, but we're going to discuss this today. And so, if you have time this week, and you should hopefully take some time to read the Bible, Genesis 4:1 through 16 tells of a saga of two brothers. And in this saga, there is a lot to consider, as was in the previous chapters that we've talked about. And as I come to Genesis, I am always reminded of a saying of one of my professors in school, who would repeatedly remind us that Genesis is the seed plot of the Bible. There is nothing in the rest of the Bible that isn't first found in Genesis in seed form. So as we study Genesis, we should always keep that thought in mind. What seeds are planted in each story that we will find being filled out more and more throughout the rest of Scripture? Now, last week we briefly mentioned the offering that the boys brought before the Lord. This early tradition of bringing offerings to the Lord, sacrifices. And we wondered, well, is this a possibility that this is Sukkot, which is the closest one to me, and the further one would be Pentecost, first fruits? The truth is, we're not given enough information in this little piece of scripture to make a definitive answer as to which one, or perhaps to both, okay? It's for us to recognize that they brought offerings and gifts for a reason. Now we might say, is there a hint in the wording of Genesis 4:3, in this wording, in the process of time? The Hebrew language is much more simplistic than what we need to make a full sentence in English. And so in Hebrew we have maketz, yamim. Now kates means extremity, unless, of course, there's a prefix, the sound. We would think of m, and this is mem in Hebrew, and then that changes it to after or end, okay, or process. And yamim is the plural of yom, which is day. So we have end days. Interesting. Which, of course, in that time frame meant probably, we think, the growing season. Well, how many growing seasons did they have? We don't know. That they would, at the harvest, present themselves to God with their offerings. But in looking at this whole pericope of Scripture, or the small whole pericope of Scripture, I see symbolism in dealing with end days. Today, we commonly call it eschatology, meaning the study of last days, or what pertains to last days. So if we think about eschatology, last days, you can read Revelations 20, 11 to 15. And all of Matthew chapter 25 basically deals, Jesus is telling parables about the kingdom of heaven and even some of the last days when he returns. And you can read those. And so what we find, and this is just a short, we're not going into detail here, but you can study more by yourself and learn more. What we learn is that everyone will be presented before the Lord. There will be books, according to Revelations, that will be opened, and deeds are recorded and will be weighed. God does the judging. A verdict is rendered, and the verdict is either acceptance or rejection. So as we look at these boys bringing their gifts before the Lord, what do we see here? Did they present themselves before the Lord? Yeah. Was a book opened? Well, not what we might think, but their deeds, their gifts that they had worked on that were brought to God, okay, was judged. God judged, and a verdict was rendered. Cain's was rejected, and Abel's was accepted. And it's in this story that the results of sin is reinforced. We see that was evidenced in their parents. The results of sin, their sin is different from what their parents was. Now, Cain's desire to be top dog in his family could only lead to one place. As James writes in his New Testament letter, but every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust is conceived, it brings forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, brings forth death. I don't know why these are getting cut off, but I'm sorry they are. And so it's in this story that we learn something about death as well. We learn that death, or maybe I should say living, there's more about life living than just living corporeally with our bodies, with this flesh. Notice when God confronts Cain in 4:10, Genesis 4:10, he says, Abel's blood cries unto me from the ground. And as I read this, I always come to the point in Revelations 6:10 where it talks about the heavenly place, the throne room of God, the Holy of Holies, and the Lord is sitting on the throne. And then it talks about these people who have been martyred. And it says they're under the altar, and I'm not really sure how that looks. I'm sorry, but my artwork isn't great. But here we go. It says, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? Kind of sounds like Abel's blood was calling unto the Lord, that the Lord would hold Cain accountable for this awful deed Cain did. So we find that being human, there's something beyond this life, in other words. Yes, we have this flesh and blood, but when that goes away, there's more of us. There's a part of us that is left and that will stand before the Lord. And we find that concept in the writing of Hebrews in 11:4, where the writer of Hebrews says about Abel's more worthy offering or sacrifice, and thereby his righteousness. He says, and by it he being dead yet speaketh. So we can see through these scriptures that there is something that I like to refer to as life after life. Yes, our bodies may pass from this living as we conceive it, but we continue to live. The question is, what will that bring to us? So we find that sin and death culminated in Cain's deed of murder. Now he has to face judgment and punishment. And if we notice in Genesis 4:9-16, when God first confronts Cain, he lies to God and says, I don't know, I don't know where he is. I don't know what you're talking about, kind of thing. And then when God confronts him with, his blood cries to me from the ground, then he goes, well, am I my brother's keeper? He waxes philosophical. I don't know what he was hoping there. Obviously, he didn't understand that God knows all things, something we'd all be wise to keep in our minds. And this brings me to Matthew 25. Now, the whole chapter, there are various things that will remind you of this little portion. But one of the things is that the king answered those who stood before him and said, Inasmuch as you have done it unto me, or unto one of the least of these my brethren, you have done it unto me. And this is talking about the sheep and the goats